Hey there, New Day Blessings. I'm your host, Denise Ann Sumbry, and welcome to another episode of the Maven Podcast. My next guest is an assistant professor and co-director of the Center on Trauma and Adversity at the Mandel School of Applied Social Sciences at Case Western Reserve University. With over a decade of experience as a mental health therapist, she now prepares future social workers for clinical practice rooted in neurobiology of trauma and healing. She is a highly sought-after speaker and consultant, bridging the gap between academia, research, and the general public, sharing complex information in accessible and actionable ways. She is the creator of the Take a Break micro-practice framework, a neurobiologically informed, body-based approach to managing stress fast. Passionate about supporting helpers and healers in navigating the systemic and interpersonal challenges of their work, she combines her expertise in nervous system support, somatics, and trauma-informed care to foster resilience and collective well-being. In addition to her professional roles, she's a mom to 3, an unschooler, a partner, and more, navigating life's complexities with authenticity and care. It is with great pleasure to welcome the one and the only Dr. Jenny King. Welcome to the Maven Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
It is a true pleasure to commune in this capacity with you. I was reflecting back on when our paths crossed, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, shout out to Nikay Olabisi Green at her Ignites Ladies Book Club. Am I right with that?
You are absolutely right. Yeah, it was the Boundaries book, which I don't remember the title specifically off the top of my head.
Set Boundaries, Find Peace.
That's
yes,
right.
by Nidra. Ooh, the last name is slipping me right now, but Tawab. Deidre Tawab.
Yes, and I remember seeing you and feeling familiar, like I recognized you right away, and then went and spoke to you and was like, actually, you don't know her. But there was this
that it was kindred
recognition right away.
Kindred spirits. Yeah. And that just a shout out again to McKay. That was a beautiful, her book club, like connected so many women and also just highlighted some very potent, powerful reads as well. And I also had the pleasure of being on a panel as well. And that was just a beautiful experience.
We need more spaces like that, for sure.
We do.
Thanks, Nikay.
Thank you, Nikay. Bless it. I always like to just ground in this moment and ask, how is your heart?
You know, this morning I woke up with a heavy heart. I've been tracking what's going on in Los Angeles. My sister lives out there. So we've been in contact. They had not been evacuated until overnight last night. So they packed up their pups and their things and were able to go stay with a relative out there, which is wonderful. But I open social media and you're just bombarded by such upsetting, tragedy. That said, once I entered into this space and saw you and hugged you, there was just a really nice shift in feeling a little more settled and a little more at peace. So right now I feel good.
Yes. And I just always love the beauty of how these conversations, the timelines for these conversations. And I'm never feeling any kind of way when schedules don't align, because I always know, like, when I sit and commune with a guest, it's always going to be divine timing. So at the point of this recording, which we're in the beautiful energy of January 11th, right? We are experiencing, the tragedy that's going on in Los Angeles, and I'll definitely add your sister and family to my prayers. And you're right, with social media, it also seems that now we're even privy to other things that are happening all over. Same kind of energy, and it's just like it's too much.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
And I think it feels hard for a lot of people, and myself included, to kind of find the balance between staying informed and not becoming overwhelmed or feeling helpless. That's something I find myself in conversation around a lot, and just trying to give thought to practices that help to find that balance a little easier.
Yeah. And I'm looking forward in this conversation for us to delve into some of those micro practices. But this is a great transition because with so much that's going on, we're also on the heels of inauguration, right? So the political aspect.
Yep.
And then not only the things that are happening here on U.S. land, but things that are happening globally,
Yes.
right? I recently was sitting with the aspect of me being a millennial. Are you considered a millennial?
I am.
So we're millennials, right? And I said, our generation, and this is not to discount any other generation,
Of course.
but I'm like, we have seen and we have felt a lot. The evolution of technology, right, was huge. 80s, right? The computers, that just has opened up. Fast forward to today, it's just opened up this whole other world, right? And access to information and things of that sort. It has its pros and cons, obviously.
Sure.
Right? But then also I think about other tragedies that have occurred, like 9/11, which from my understanding is one of the most historic acts of terrorism on U.S. land.
Mm-hmm.
So to go through that in real life time, and also having, that was in 2001. So I don't think we didn't have social media then.
No.
But we had the news and things of that sort. I also think about the introduction, for lack of a better word, of mass school shootings. Right? And I say all that to say that I have to kind of sit with myself. I won't even say check myself in this regard, because I'm like, I'm rarely surprised anymore. And I question the element of where myself and other folks in my generation who have experienced micro and macro tragedies and all other aspects that can be against us, right? Am I desensitized? Or where's the, where am I dissociating? Even I even set with the term of like zoning out, right? What is your word of advice? Well, first of all, I guess this is so layered. This is so juicy.
So juicy.
It's so juicy. I guess the first question becomes, how does one recognize that they are desensitized or dissociating? Are they one and the same? Are they kind of different? Can you shed a little light on that aspect?
Sure. So let me start with dissociation, and I'll come at this from sort of the nervous system perspective, which is where I spend a lot of time. When we think about what happens in the body when we experience stress, sort of the stress alarm goes off in the body, the stress response is activated. a whole sort of host of changes happens in the body, and it can go many different ways. I think often it's presented like there's this spectrum and dissociation's on one side and kind of like hypervigilance is on the other side, when in reality, they each have their own spectrums, right? And so dissociation, like hypervigilance, is a really adaptive response to stress. And interestingly, what a lot of people don't understand is that physiologically what's happening when you are having a dissociative response is that in like a slow and sort of titrated way, your heart rate's slowing down, your blood pressure is dropping. In really extreme cases, your body will release its own natural painkillers. So really what it is it's the body employing a strategy that is meant to ensure survival. And so for many of us, for women, not to oversimplify gender, but more commonly for women, for children, if you are in an experience where you're unable to get away, you can't run away, you can't fight back, dissociation will probably be your body's best option and will kind of kick that into high gear for you. Now, we all dissociate to different degrees all the time. That is that zoning out. I think about that as like the first step on that spectrum of dissociation is daydreaming, zoning out, those sorts of things. And really, we do them just for a couple minutes at a time usually, right? We're kind of moving in and out of that state.
Yes, and you kind of snap out of it.
Yeah.
Back to what you're doing. I get it.
Yeah, and sometimes like that highway hypnosis is another great example of dissociation when you're driving, right? You're taking a route that you have taken a million times before, and you're at one point, you think, oh, I have like 20 minutes more of this drive, and then all of a sudden you're pulling into your driveway, and you're like,
There's a term for that? What is it called?
highway hypnosis. That's not like a scientific term. It's like that.
I love it. Like I've equated it to almost being in a meditation.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so dissociation gets a bad name for sure. It's an adaptive strategy that, again, our nervous system employs for us when it's going to be most effective. That said, though, like any other strategy, any other sort of survival-oriented strategy, it works to a point. It works until it doesn't. Or I think if it becomes your only option, right? Any bit of stress, you're immediately going to zone out, or you're not kind of tapping back in after a few minutes. You stay in this sort of prolonged dissociative place. That's not great. Okay. Because ideally, even when we're under stress, we're kind of moving in and out of that sort of zoned out, also kind of robotic place where acute loss, I think, is a great example of how we move in and out of dissociation and hypervigilance. So you'll have moments where you're very reactive and you're crying, you're screaming, whatever the case may be. But then sometimes even minutes later, you're able to kind of go through the motions of whatever has to happen next. And that's a nice example of sort of moving in and out of the two.
That is beautifully explained. And what I'm hearing is dissociation is not necessarily a bad thing, that it's a natural way of our mind, body, and spirit essentially like protecting itself, as you mentioned, for survival.
Yeah.
And it's the same basis as our ancestors, just the conditions are different.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
That's potent.
Yeah, so in an ideal world, we don't become over-reliant on any of these sort of survival responses, and we're able to kind of work with them and to get to know the language of our unique nervous system so that we have a little bit of control over how and when they're being employed. Because it really is unconscious. I mean, you don't choose to dissociate while you're scrolling. right? That's not an active choice that you're making.
Right.
But if you catch yourself, right, if you're able to kind of be in whatever practice helps you to get back into your body, then you can make a decision what you want to do with that information. You know, I think that a lot of what is helpful to think about in stress management and in this world of polycrisis that we've been in for, like you said, I mean, I was going to say the past 5 years, but yeah, as a millennial, I mean, our lives have kind of been marked by these different experiences.
Yes.
And so part of what I think our task is, or what I hope for myself and for the people in my different spheres, is just for us to be able to have a little bit more capacity, a little bit more space to be able to understand our responses, use them in ways that don't harm us or other people, right? And to understand them for the wisdom that they provide us, which is not possible if we're immediately rushing out of them or immediately, trying to squash them or whatever the case may be.
It's really the art of, it's a mixed bag.
Mm-hmm.
It's the art of self-awareness and becoming self-aware.
Yeah.
That's a journey.
Yes, it is.
All on its own. I truly believe self-awareness is can be the igniter. And feel free if you feel like there's something before that, this like open to hearing that. But like when I even think about my journey as it relates to even communing with my emotions, it was the unexpected, just totally genuine question by someone. Denise, are you happy? And in that moment, I was like, well, yeah, what do you mean? Like, I was almost offended. Like what you think I have to?
What are you trying to say?
I'm a Capricorn too, so we're always like side-eyed, like, where'd that question come from? Hold on, wait a minute. And I remember at that time, like, I rattled off all these things. Of course I'm happy. I'm doing this, I have this, da, da, da. And then when I got in the car on my way home, I said, damn, am I happy? And I literally probably was in a highway hypnosis.
You probably were.
I was flashing all the different areas of life. But the key thing was, even though all these pictures were coming up, and I'm like, I couldn't connect to the vibration of happy. And I said, uh-oh. I said, uh-oh. And that essentially was the activator for me becoming self-aware of the emotional spectrum.
Yeah.
It's in that, honey.
We're not socialized to do that. We're not culturally reinforced to do that. I think going back to, you mentioned our ancestors, I think about the way that a disconnect between mind and body may have been very helpful for them in getting through what they had to get through. And so I think that disconnect has kind of been passed on. We've inherited it, but also capitalism loves that for us too, right? If we're out of our bodies, if we're so focused on doing and producing and consuming and all of those different things, it's so easy to lose touch with what does happiness feel like? How do I know when I am happy? And am I able to catch those moments, to be able to check in with myself, to say, oh, there it is.
There it is.
Right? Yeah. There it is. It's in my belly. There's warmth in my chest. What are the sensations? And getting curious about those things, I think, can just help nudge us toward the self-awareness that you're talking about.
Absolutely. Because I found in my journey, it was I was either way on this end of the spectrum as it relates to emotions,
Mm-hmm.
or I was far on this side. So as far as it relates to me recognizing what I'm feeling,
Yeah.
I knew when I was angry.
Mm.
I knew when I was pissed off. I know it's no emotion, but and then on the far other end of the spectrum, I knew when I was like really excited, like it was more intense. And what I found that I needed to connect with more was like, it's okay in neutrality and some of the other emotions that are left and right of that, like calm
Yeah.
and peace,
Yeah. Content.
Yeah. Or sadness,
Disappointment. Yeah.
right? Like, and getting more comfortable with leaning into those vibrations. First of all, and when I say comfortable, acknowledging them,
Yeah.
feeling them.
Yes.
And one of the things that helped me with that when I made the decision, because here's the other thing, a person, place, or thing that ignites an awakening within self, you have a choice. You're either going to dance with it and get curious. I love that vibration. I love that term too. Just get curious, or you're not. Not has consequences. That's a whole nother conversation, right? But I made the decision to commune with it. And with that, I had to sometimes even Google search what I thought what I was feeling, was anger. And then I would look to see what the synonyms were for anger. And I'm like, no, that ain't quite it. That's extra. That's far in, further in for me.
Yeah.
And then I just kind of did a like breadcrumbing from there. And I'm like, well, okay, maybe it is. Let me look up disappointed. Am I disappointed or am I sad? And then I'll look to see the vibrations that correlate. And I'm like, that. And I could feel the resonance.
Yes.
In my body, the validation, the confirmation in my body where I'm like, oh, that's what I'm feeling.
Yes. Language is important, and being able to name the experience can help make it feel more manageable. There's this, Dan Siegel is, I think, a neurobiologist, uses the phrase, name it to tame it. And if we're able to accurately identify, right? Because everything is not anger. Every negative reaction is not anger. And there are implications there for what we do with those feelings, because what's going to work for me to get into a more settled place when I'm angry is not the same practice that's going to work for me when I'm just irritated.
Yes.
Right? We need different strategies and tools, and being able to kind of, develop, it's like a feelings vocabulary, as many words as possible. I love that you used Google. I love those feeling wheels. I have those all over the place. But I think of coming back to the body again, what's really interesting to me is those extremes that you named. Like I know when I'm angry, I know when I'm rageful, I know when I'm ecstatic and excited. If you think about it in the body, a lot of those sensations are the same.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh my goodness.
There's like the activation in the belly. There's, your blood pumping.
Your breathing accelerates.
Yes, your heart's beating a little bit faster.
Your eyes open wide. Your mouth is, either clenched or open.
Exactly. And so being able to, again, get curious about those sensations and also not feel like you have to immediately override them, right? Can you sit with them long enough to really be able to sense into the wisdom that's there, or even just to accurately identify what's going on? But those are intense sensations, and I think we tend to avoid them, or again, try to move out of them as quickly as we can, just because we're not great at sitting with discomfort.
Correct. And that, this journey for me, we're coming up on like a decade now. But when I think back on that, I was raging or angry. There was a bit of like, obviously sitting with myself on it, but I I have no time for this. Sweep it under the rug.
Oh, yes.
But then I notice I do the same thing even when I'm excitement and jubilee was fleeting as well.
Yeah.
Right? Like, oh, I may experience for that moment, but then it's like, okay, on to the next.
It's so sad.
And it's like, wow. I would say that's probably one of the questions that really changed my life. And I just thought it was so interesting that it was an emotional question.
Mm-hmm.
Are you happy? And also in complete transparency, the happy, I don't know if because that question was tied to essentially the embarking of my life being turned around and upside down in a sense. I kind of tiptoe with happiness, like even still today, like I feel it, I can recognize it, but I'm more comfortable leaning into satisfaction. Like, okay, this I feel more comfortable in satisfaction and versus like, yeah, I'm happy. Almost like happy can be a bit of a trigger word for me.
Yes.
And complete transparency.
Yes. Well, what does that even mean? I mean, what does happy mean? And I think what you're describing is a much more accurate, where these emotional experiences and physical experiences, they all are usually pretty fleeting, right? And so I might be satisfied in this moment with who I am and where I am and all of those different things. That is a lot easier for me to identify with than happy, for sure. For sure.
And I just feel like, you know, I want to lean into something that I can grasp.
Yes.
And a feeling that I can grasp and bask in, you know, and just be with.
Just be with.
You know?
Yeah. Those, when you said about sweeping under the rug, same. And it's been a journey to unravel, I think, some of the learning that I've done around emotional expression. I'm a double water sign. I feel deeply and often. And I think so much of my life was about how do I contain that? How do I manage that? How do I sweep it under the rug, like you said? But the way that we do that in thinking about the body and tension, right? The way that we sort of tense up in order to dampen sensation, which we might do with anger, right? When we feel those uncomfortable sort of things, we all have our sort of hot spots in the body where, you know, that's it for me. Me is like shoulders and jaw, 100%. Right now, like I could probably drop my shoulders if I tried. That strategy again works, but it dampens all of it. So it dampens our sensations around happiness and jubilee and excitement and all of that too. So coming back to curiosity and awareness, can you buy yourself a little bit of time before you immediately try to sweep it away?
That part. Just even a few moments to start.
Yeah.
To begin to break that behavior.
Yeah.
And pattern, you know. And I know that when you embark on that, then your mind and body, and I'll even say your spirit, then begins to crave that space and attention, you know. And then that's where you'll find that you make space, you know. Now it turns, you know, oh, now I can sit with myself for 30 minutes. And now, oh, I'm learning these strategies, these micro practices,
right,
you know, to support me in this additional bucket of time that I'm dedicating to myself to soothe, to commune, to understand, to just be with, not change, not transmute. That will come. That will come, you know. That's beautifully said.
Yeah, we just have to keep practicing.
Absolutely.
And to be clear, it is not easy. Turning inward like that is not easy.
Listen.
for anyone.
No.
But I think for a multitude of reasons, especially the body stuff, is really challenging. So I don't want to be oversimplifying this to say, yeah, scan your body and see what's going on in there, when for a lot of reasons that is hard or even sometimes painful, I think, for folks to do. So just a little asterisk by all of that. But I think curiosity as a practice is something we can all wrap our hands around.
Absolutely. And thank you for saying that. Because what I know to be true, what I've experienced in my journey has put me in even more anchoring position to not judge another person. If they are not ready, I get it. I get why people don't say yes to a journey of trauma healing, emotional healing, mental healing. I get it, especially if you don't have the people, places, things, support, resources, strategies to support you in that. And that's why that part of the backing of the Maven podcast to share these conversations. I feel like no one should have to do that work alone.
Yes.
That was my like at the time when I looked to my left, I looked to my right. Nobody else was experiencing what I had going on. And so a lot of my life's work from that point has always been like, no one has to do this work alone.
That's so important.
Yeah, you don't have to do it alone. And that brings to the point of what building community,
Yes.
right? Being curious, asking the questions, is so, so important.
And learning how to truly be in community and ask for what you need and make those bids for care and all of those pieces, because I don't even think it's possible to do it alone. Truly, I don't think that it's possible. I think the journey would look really different if you were isolated in that way, because the biggest buffer, the most effective buffer that we have against stress and trauma is each other.
Yes. Relational
Relational connection is what's going to protect us when things get ugly. And so being able to turn toward, I like to think of them as my North Star people. So who are the people that probably right now you can bring somebody to mind that if they walked into the room, you would just sort of automatically like sigh a little bit. And there are the people who do the opposite. We can have the balance. But thinking about who are those people for you and what your sort of constellation or community, what do those folks, how and where do they show up? How can you turn toward them? How can you make sure that there's reciprocity in the relationship? Yeah, really fine tuning, like who are my people and how can I both be of service, care, and receive care from them?
You recently shared some thoughts regarding community and how building community and being embraced by community has its messy side.
Oh, yeah.
Can you speak more to your perspective on that?
Yeah.
Hey there. Thank you for tuning in for part 1 of this wholesome conversation with Dr. Jenny King. Be sure to subscribe and follow the Maven Podcast so you don't miss part 2 as Dr. King shares her enlightening perspective on community, as well walks us through the realm of nervous system support and somatic practices. See you next week.